U.S. Marine files hidden complaint. Signal at the rest stop, but it. Only 3 dogs noticed. On a deserted stop in the hot sea desert. U.S. infantryman with his hands tied and with his wounded face he gave a hidden signal about help. None of the people noticed him. Except for 3 German shepherds, which, as if messengers from above, understood everything without words. The Arizona desert lay in silence, under a sky the color of burnt flax. Late at midday a rare wind brought dry dust from the plateau and got stuck in the cracks in the asphalt. On the edge of the highway near the old roadside Saguaro Stop Cafe everything seemed normal. A tattered sign, faded jalousie. The creaking of floorboards and the smell of cheap coffee. Sylvia Ramirez worked as a counter attendant. A woman of about 50, with dark eyes and a tired face. Once she laughed. Easy, but after the death of her Marine husband during the exercises in Cape Town her smile became rare. The bell above the door rang. And Sylvia turned around automatically. But not a single person entered the hall. Instead, 3 Germans appeared on the threshold. Shepherds. They walked slowly, one after the other. Another, like soldiers in formation. The first, tall, with dark fur and silver on face, with an old scar near the eye. The second, smaller, with a white spot on the chest and with quick, nervous movements. Third, still almost a puppy with large paws and with a wary look. They didn't have collars, but in their movements there was a sense of discipline. Sylvia sat down, putting down a bowl of water. The elder one drank calmly, the second greedily, and the third. First I waited for her to move away. The visitors quickly returned to their business, but the dogs seemed to hear something beyond the ordinary. At this time, the far edge of the parking lot silently. A gray SUV stopped. Tinted windows. No one came out. But the 2 shepherds froze, staring at one place outside the window. Their bodies tensed. The ears rose and a wave hung in the air. Invisible anxiety. Sylvia caught it. Her husband once said, "A shepherd is not will bark for no reason, but if it freezes, which means it's calculating something." Sylvia straightened up and involuntarily looked up. Where the dogs were looking. Gray. The SUV stood as if it had dissolved in stillness. The engine was running, but no one didn't move. The glass was so dark that it was impossible to see behind them. To see something. The bell on the door rang again. This time it was a man, tall, in a gray suit, with neatly combed light hair and cold blue eyes. The gait was measured, confident as for someone who is used to not having it. Object. Under the jacket one could guess on shoulder holster, and the suit did not hide well its outline. "Good evening, exactly," said Sylvia, coming up with a coffee pot. "There is no menu," he replied without looking at her. Black coffee, she poured. The man sat down so that he could see both the window and his car. His gaze was precise, as if he was waiting for something. At this time, 2 shepherds, the older one and the one with the white spot, did not take their eyes off the SUV. The puppy was nervous, but stayed close, sometimes whining quietly. In their bodies, there was a feeling of tension, like before. Sylvia noticed, fingers. Strangers lying on the table, from time to time. Time lightly tapped. 3 short. Rhythm. He drank his coffee slowly, but his eyes increasingly slid towards the parking lot. Suddenly, the older dog stood up, walked to the door and quietly nudged her with his nose. The bell again rang. None of the visitors paid attention. But Sylvia saw him off. With a glance, the dog moved along the wall, hiding in the shadows, and stopped at the back SUV doors. There, in the barely noticeable gap between, a glimpse of the sun protection and window frame. Something bright. An eye, exhausted with, bruised and swollen. He blinked 3 times, paused and repeated 3 times. Sylvia felt a chill run through back. She remembered how her husband talked about the military signals of prisoners. 3 blinks, 3 hits, 3 dashes. There was a call for help. The dog stood motionless, looking out the window while the one inside was repeating. Signal. Then he returned to the cafe, approached Sylvia and touched the floor with his paw. Once. 2, 3. Did you see it too? She asked quietly. A coal-aged regular at the counter. He turned pale. It's a cat, he confirmed. Sylvia took out her phone but didn't call 911. Instead, I dialed Sheriff Rachel Marin's direct line. An old friend who once served in the military police. Rachel, this is Sylvia. I need you to come urgently. Saguara, stop. There's someone in the car. I think he's in danger. And my dog saw it. As he blinked SOS. For a second in the receiver. There was silence. Stay put. I will. In 10 minutes. Sylvia put phone. Her gaze met his eyes. Men in a suit. He looked straight at her without curiosity, without suspicion, with cold confidence. Puppy. Feeling the tension, he growled quietly. Outside the window the sun touched the horizon, and long purple ones stretched across the parking lot. Shadows. The air in the cafe seemed to freeze. Everything. Sounds, light crackling of radio, jingling cups, the rustle of clothes became muffled. Dogs sat as if at a combat post. The bell rang again. He came in. Young guy with a backpack, tired and dusty, apparently a hitchhiker. He got into corner, not noticing the tense atmosphere. A stranger in a suit slid past him. Glance, then looked out the window again. Sylvia slowly removed her hands from the counter, so that no one would see them trembling. There was only one thought in her head, Rachel. I have to get it done before it gets too much late. It was getting dark quickly outside. The azure sky turned to deep blue, and then almost black velvet, strewn. The first stars. Fluorescent lamps. Under the canopy of the parking lot they lit up, flooding asphalt with cold light. Inside the Saguar. Stop time seemed to slow down. Senior. The dog was lying by the door, but his ears were catching every sound. The second one with a white spot moved barely noticeably, as if checking positions. The puppy sat at the entrance. His gaze did not let go of the man in the gray suit. Suddenly the puppy barked sharply. 1. A short loud sound like a blow to silence. The visitors shuddered. The man behind the counter is a heavy-set truck driver named 2-3, Sylvia's heart sank. This. Repeated. SOS code. Bell on. The door rang again. Duck entered the cafe, holding the hand of his little daughter Cassie. He noticed the dogs at once. Well, Sylvia opened a shelter, he chuckled. He reached out his hand to the puppy, but he instantly stood between him and Sylvia, raising his fur on the withers. Duck pulled his hand away. Okay, I get it. The man in the suit continued meanwhile. Sit, but his fingers are on the tabletop. Started beating the rhythm again. Sylvia. I saw that he tensed up. He was waiting for something. Glenn came out from the kitchen holding towel in his hands. He managed to notice Sylvia's gaze and nodded slightly, as if to say, hold on. But the tension in the air became almost tangible. And here, in the distance, a faint siren's wail could be heard across the desert, barely audible but real. Man in a suit froze, then slowly finished his coffee and stood up. He threw a bill on the counter and he muttered, no change. He headed off to the exit. At the same moment, the older dog and the second one jumped up and slid out in sync, followed by the door closing with a quiet ringing sound. Behind them, the puppy remained inside, but everything. His body was shaking with tension. Sylvia followed, but before reaching the threshold, froze. In the parking lot under the light of a lantern, the man in the suit stood facing the car, and the elder was approaching him. Dog. He walked slowly, confidently, taking position right on the path. The second dog went around the SUV behind, growling low, in a menacing bass voice. The man darted his hand to the jacket pocket. The metal flashed in the light of the flashlight, a pistol. But before I managed to raise my weapon, the puppy flew out the cafe doors, like a spring, and grabbed onto the attacker's hand. The dull crack of fabric, bells, metal clatter, gun fell onto the asphalt. Inside, Duck shouted, pulling his daughter away. Behind him, the man tried to fight back, but the older dog didn't move from his place, continuing to block the path to the car, and second freeze at the back door. SUV, without giving anyone approach. And suddenly from inside the car, a dull thud was heard. All eyes turned around. In the narrow crack of the window again, eyes appeared, exhausted, beaten, pleading. Oh God, there's someone there. Sylvia exhaled. The siren was now sounding louder, approaching. Red and blue reflections flashed on the road to the parking lot. The sheriff's car suddenly flew in. Behind it, another one SUV with government numbers. Sheriff Rachel Marina jumped out. The first in a black tactical jacket with determination in every movement. No one move. Her voice cut through the air. Deputy Sheriff Nathan Kim picked up gun from the ground. Man in a suit stood there, breathing heavily. His sleeve was torn and bloody. He is armed and dangerous, Sylvia said quickly, pointing to the SUV. And they're inside. The man is tied up. Rachel ran up to the car, and the blow of the flashlight smashed the rear glass. From the inside, leaning against the seat, a man in military uniform appeared, all bruised and with his mouth taped shut. Dogs retreated, but remained nearby, while the sheriff and the deputy pulled out the prisoner. The older dog sat down a little further, watching with every movement. And the puppy, breathing heavily, lay down next to the man, as if not was going to let him go. Red and blue lights were flashing on the walls of the cafe, and in the desert. The silence of the night reigned again, only now, with a dull echo of what is here happened. Red and blue flashes were blinking. Asphalt, cafe walls and dusty bushes. At the edge of the parking lot, the air was thick with the smell of gasoline, hot metal and the pungent smell of blood. Sheriff Rachel Marina, without wasting a second, opened the back door of the SUV. Inside sat a man of about 5 years old with short hair in a crumpled military uniform. Arms and legs were bound wide. Stripes of silver tape. Mouth sealed. The head hung limply on shoulder. Bruised forehead, under the eye. Dried blood. Alive. Briefly, Rachel dropped and turned around. A knife. Sylvia was already running from the cafe, holding in his hands is a kitchen knife, the same one that her late husband once cut steaks. In the evenings, she sat down next to him and, with trembling hands, I cut the tape. The captive's wrists. The tight bands fell on seat, leaving deep marks on the skin. Red marks. Everything is fine, she repeated quietly, moving to the feet. You are safe. The film came off his mouth with a quiet crackling sound, and the man sucked in a breath, coughing and wincing in pain. His gaze was metallic. Until I settled on 3 shepherds, frozen at the car door. The elder looked straight into the eyes, the second one was held a little side, the puppy is almost under the seat. Sergeant Troy, Maddox, he said hoarsely. He said. Rachel nodded. We're in course. You disappeared 2 weeks ago. This moment Deputy Kim, searching SUV, loudly called out, Sheriff. We have a lot of interesting things here. He pulled out a black one from the luggage compartment. Plastic container wrapped with Scotch tape. Inside were folders with personal data, fake documents, packs of dollars and pesos, as well as a list. Names. Among them are the name of Sergeant Maddox and a few more missing people. Rachel turned to the man in the gray suit, who was already being held by 2 police officers. He was silent, looking ahead with a cold detachment. His sleeve was soaked with blood, but he didn't even wince. Elliot Crane. Rachel said, as if checking reaction. The suspect in the case of interstate human trafficking. Next to the second, the detainee, a wiry man with eyes and face weathered by the sun, pulled out of the shadows by the fence. Where is he? Hiding? Martin Griefs added. Rachel. Number 2 in the same case. Sylvia froze, looking at kidnappers, then on the sergeant. Dogs, all this remained in position for a while. Senior. Motionless guard, second at the machine. Ambulance, puppy at Maddox's feet. They, the sergeant croaked, were planning transport further across the border. No. I need to talk, she interrupted him softly. Sylvia. Rest. Felsher, short. A woman with gray strands named Sandra was already preparing the stretcher. The assistant carefully helped Maddox out, Cassie looked at the dogs with wide eyes. With her eyes, and then quietly whispered to her father. "Dad, they are like heroes in a movie." When the ambulance drove away, Rachel walked up to Sylvia. "You called because I trusted their instinct," she said, nodding towards the dogs, and found herself. "Right. I just felt it," Sylvia replied. "They're always doing something." Tried to say. Deputy Kim took away detainees to patrol cars. Crane. He was still silent, but for a second his gaze slid to the older dog, and for the first time all evening in his eyes something like irritation flashed. Fear. The elder slowly turned head, following him with her gaze. When the sirens died away in the distance and the parking lot again plunged into the silence of the night, Sylvia, Rachel and Glenn stayed near the cafe. Dogs lay down next to each other, and only their even breathing reminded me that I had been here not long ago. Chaos. "Do you think they are military?" he asked. "Glenn, perhaps," Rachel replied. "Too coordinated to be normal. Stray dogs. Maybe written off service or lost after missions. But it looks like they've chosen a new one for themselves. Task and completed it." Sylvia. She put her hand on the elder's head. He closed his eyes but stayed in place. Puppy sighed and laid his muzzle on her lap. Far away beyond the desert the wind howled again. But now he seemed not threatening, but somehow relieved, like the night itself. Exhaled after a long period of tension. And at that moment Sylvia realized, history just started. 2 months have passed. The Tucson County courtroom was packed. Journalists, local residents, veterans. Headlines in newspapers and on television thundered. 3 German shepherds tore off. Marine kidnapping. In the dock. Elliot Crane and Martin Griffiths. Their faces remained cold, but there was no evidence. There were too many. The list of missing. Found in car, witness statements. And most importantly, the words of Sergeant Troy Matt Dogs. Sylvia Ramirez testified. She told how she noticed something strange. Dog behavior, how the elder spent paw on the floor 3 times. Her voice was even, but you could feel it in the hall. Tension. Everyone understood that if it weren't for she and the dogs, everything would have ended in tragedy. Among those present sat himself. Matt Dogs, already recovered, was in the front hall. Form. When the meeting was declared closed, and the judge sentenced him to long terms imprisonment for both kidnappers, he stood up and walked over to the dogs sitting by doors, and dropped to one knee. "Now you are my team," he said quietly. Through a small shop opened in the suburbs last week. Shelter. There was a wooden sign hanging above the entrance. Sign, Shelter Bravo. On it are silhouettes. 3 shepherds. It was Sylvia's project and Matt Dogsa, supported by the city. Here, homeless and written-off people found a home. Service dogs. The elder Alpha became symbol of the shelter. His photo hung at entrance with the signature, "He who saw that. What others missed." 2nd Bravo. Took up guard duty at the gate. Charlie the puppy. Most often I was with children and especially with little Miko, the son of a woman from neighboring district. One spring. Days ago, a girl named Casey Fenley came to the shelter with father. In her hands she held a drawing. 3 shepherds stand against the backdrop of the desert, and between. A man in military uniform is standing next to them. Inscription. In large letters, Keepers. Drawing. Hung in the hall under glass. In the evening, when the visitors had left, Sylvia sat on the porch of the shelter with a cup. Mint tea. Alpha was lying nearby, putting. Head on her lap. Bravo was on duty. Gate, and Charlie was chasing the sword with Miko and his mother. Troy came out of the workshop, wiped his hands on his flannel shirt and looked at it. You know, he said. Sylvia, I thought I'd come back to life. It will be more difficult, but it seems that I just. The right partners were needed. Sylvia smiled. And me too. The sun was setting behind the hills, painting the desert golden orange tones. The wind carried the smell of warm dust and cactus flowers. There was no sound in this silence. Anxiety, just a feeling that now everything in their places. Sometimes heroes come to our life quietly, without fanfare, without medals, just walking along the road, sensitively. Listen to the world and notice in time what others might miss. These three did exactly that. And perhaps that's why their story will never be forgotten.